Your Honor, Beatrice said, wiping her eyes with a tissue and making a theatrical gesture toward the witness stand, my sister is just too unstable and unpredictable to manage our father's estate. Since his death, she has been experiencing acute spells of anxiety and depression. I have medical records that demonstrate her incapacity to make wise financial decisions. I sat there in that sterile courtroom in Portland, Oregon, feeling like the walls were closing in on me. The judge nodded sympathetically at Beatrix's testimony, obviously buying every word of her intricate deception, and I felt my face burn with shame as I watched my own sister put on this theatrical show of concern, portraying me as some sort of unstable, dangerous person who couldn't be trusted with my own inheritance. I'm 32 years old, and my name is Lily Patterson. My father passed away from cancer 6 months ago, and I was witnessing my sister attempt to take all he had fought so hard to achieve in his life. However, it wasn't only the money that made this betrayal so terrible. It was the methodical way Beatrice had planned this whole scheme while our father lay dying in his hospital bed. The documents spread across the defendant's table looked official enough to fool anyone. Medical records, psychological evaluations, and psychiatric recommendations, all bearing my name and detailing a fabricated history of mental illness that would make anyone question my competency. I had been suffering from severe bipolar disorder, had attempted suicide several times, and needed constant supervision to function in daily life, according to Beatrix's falsified documents. All of this was untrue, but as I watched the judge's face become increasingly worried with each piece of evidence, I realized how masterfully my sister had pulled off this scam. She turns violent when questioned about her spending habits. Beatrice went on, her voice trembling with fake emotion. She stole my medical information during those long nights at the hospital, used it to create documents that looked authentic, and even taught herself the proper medical terminology to make her lies sound convincing. Last month, she threw a vase at me during a family dinner. My lawyer had told me to keep my cool and let the legal process play out, but he didn't realize that Beatrice had considered every possibility. I'm really worried about what might happen if she takes control of father's assets. She could harm herself or others. The vase, she said, had fallen off the table during an argument, but she had photographed the broken pieces and turned the incident into proof of my alleged violent tendencies. She had spent months preparing for this moment, building a paper trail that would persuade any court that I was mentally incompetent. One scary idea kept coming to me as I listened to her testimony: what if she really wins? Beatrice and I had been inseparable growing up, and I had always looked up to her as my protector and mentor, even though she was 4 years older than me. When our mother died in a car accident when I was 15, Beatrix took over to help Dad raise me, and I thought our relationship was unbreakable. But money changes people in ways you never expect. Our Portland childhood was full of late-night conversations, shared secrets, and the kind of bond that made other siblings jealous. With just a pickup truck and a few simple tools, our father, Robert Patterson, had started a successful construction business from scratch. He had transformed Patterson Construction into one of the most reputable companies in Oregon, specializing in high-end residential projects and commercial buildings. By the time he was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer last year, the company had grown to be worth almost $2 million, and he had amassed significant savings and real estate holdings. Beatrice had always been ambitious, but I started to notice subtle changes in her conduct during Dad's last months in the hospital. She would volunteer to handle all of Dad's paperwork, claiming she wanted to relieve me of the load during such a trying time. I didn't realize that she was using those private moments to photograph his medical files, insurance documents, and personal information. She would arrive early for visiting hours and stay late, saying she was simply being a loving daughter. Dad had always promised that Beatrice and I would inherit everything equally, and she had allegedly gotten access to his office files while arranging his affairs. And she had even persuaded him to grant her power of attorney in case something happened before he could amend his will. Beatrice had informed me of her true plan 2 weeks after the funeral, when she approached me with a gentle voice and a worried expression. He had mentioned updating his will to reflect some recent property acquisitions, but the cancer progressed more quickly than anyone had anticipated, and he died before making those changes. The existing will stated that everything was to be divided 50-50 between us. I had been going to grief counseling sessions with Dr. Catherine Winters, a psychiatrist who specialized in helping people process loss, and I was thinking about Dad's estate. Lily, sweetheart. You've been so emotional and erratic since he passed away, so perhaps it would be better if I took care of the financial aspects until you're feeling more stable. I don't need you to manage my inheritance, I had told Beatrice forcefully. But she seemed to regard my therapy as proof of mental weakness rather than emotional strength. Even if the sessions were helping me deal with Dad's death in healthy ways. I can manage my things quite fine on my own. After that conversation, which had been our final civil exchange, Beatrix's attorney filed papers alleging that I was mentally incompetent and asking for guardianship over my share of the estate. She had used those false medical records to support her petition, which depicted a sister who was not only mentally ill but also potentially dangerous. I finally realized, as I sat in this courtroom listening to her lies, that Beatrice had never thought of me as her beloved sister but rather as a barrier preventing her from taking full control of our father's wealth. Beatrix's lawyer showed me what looked to be my entire psychiatric file, lengthy, professional-looking records with details that chilled my blood, and that was the moment that crushed any hope I still had. Your Honor, these medical records span the past 3 years, Beatrix's lawyer explained, holding up the damning folder. These falsified documents claimed that I had been receiving treatment for severe bipolar disorder in secret, had been hospitalized several times for psychotic episodes, and needed daily medication to prevent violent outbursts. In order to safeguard her sisters and their father's economic interests, my client has been discreetly handling these situations, which amply demonstrate Miss Patterson's declining mental health and growing incapacity to make logical decisions. I was horrified to see page after page of false information given as proof, including fake prescriptions for drugs I had never taken, notes from therapy sessions I had never gone to, and even hospital intake paperwork from places I had never been. The judge scanned the papers with increasing anxiety, looking at me now and again as if to see if I could suddenly become violent, but Beatrice had done her homework, crafting a thorough fiction that would persuade any rational person that I was mentally disturbed. Miss Patterson, he said directly to me, do you use any mental health drugs now? Beatrix's lawyer objected right away. No, Your Honor, I said, attempting to sound composed, these documents are totally fake. I've simply been going to bereavement counseling with Dr. Catherine Winters to assist in processing my father's death. It was a perfect trap. If I denied the accusations, they said, it proved I was delusional. Your Honor, denial of mental illness is a common symptom of the conditions described in these medical records. Miss Patterson's inability to acknowledge her psychological problems is precisely why she needs supervised care. They would use it as proof that I was mentally unbalanced if I confessed to any emotional difficulties after my father's death. Beatrice had considered every possible defense and had prepared counterarguments beforehand. And Beatrix's lawyer went on, Miss Patterson has been acting more and more strangely ever since her father died. In addition to having violent outbursts during family get-togethers and making a number of costly, impulsive purchases, she has also revealed paranoid notions that her sister is somehow planning an attack on her. The big purchases were actually payments for Dad's funeral costs and medical bills. The angry outbursts had been my normal emotional reactions to Beatrix's manipulative behavior. And my paranoid beliefs about her plotting against me were turning out to be completely accurate. None of it was true, but the lies were specific and detailed enough to sound credible. It was with a crushing sense of powerlessness that I sat there listening to this character assassination wrapped in worried testimony. Beatrice had painstakingly built this complex lie over months, and she had done it so well that even I was beginning to question my own recollections. The judge's preliminary ruling felt like a physical blow, but then I remembered something that gave me the first hope I'd felt all day. Dr. Catherine Winters was still out there. And she had the actual medical records that could prove Beatrix's lies. Based on the evidence presented, I'm inclined to grant temporary guardianship to Miss Beatrix Patterson, pending a thorough psychological evaluation of the respondent. Miss Lily Patterson will undergo a comprehensive psychiatric assessment within the next 30 days to determine her competency to manage financial affairs." His words reverberated throughout the courtroom as my entire world fell apart. I watched Beatrice struggle to contain her satisfaction as she nodded solemnly and dabbed at the judge's decision with tissues. Her victory celebration would have to wait until we left the courtroom, even if she had won the first round. She continued to play the hesitant, worried sister who just cared about what was best for everyone for the time being. But the judge went on, and I saw Beatrix's expression change to one of uncertainty. "I'm worried by some contradictions in the medical documentation. An impartial psychiatrist will be chosen by the court to examine these documents and carry out the assessment. We will meet again for a final hearing in 2 weeks." I was encouraged by the slight hesitancy in his speech. Perhaps Beatrice had overestimated the quality of the fake documents. Perhaps a qualified medical expert would see the lies that had deceived the legal system. Beatrix nodded eagerly when her lawyer whispered something in her ear as we collected our papers to depart, although I was unable to hear her exact comments. I could tell she wasn't concerned about an outside assessment by the assured way she straightened her shoulders. She most likely believed that her falsified documents were complete enough to deceive another psychiatrist. "Lily," Beatrice said to me in the courtroom hallway, her voice brimming with phony pity, "I want you to know that my only motivation is my love for you. We can collaborate to properly commemorate Dad's memory once you receive the assistance you require." Her performance was astounding in its daring. Here was the lady who'd spent months preparing to rob me of my fortune, and she was still claiming to be the kind older sister looking out for my best interests. Even though I was furious, I told her calmly, "I know exactly what you're doing," maintaining a level voice. "You will also have to deal with unanticipated repercussions when the truth is revealed." She giggled gently, a sound that made my skin crawl. "You're demonstrating your paranoid fantasies, my dear. No conspiracy exists. Only medical information and legal processes are in place to keep you from making choices you'll come to regret." Her lawyer, appearing smugly assured and holding a briefcase full of lies, joined us. "Miss Patterson, I would advise you to spend the next 2 weeks getting ready for the mental assessment. When we decide which long-term care options are best for your health, cooperation with the process will help you." They were already planning my future and talking about my life as though I wasn't there. I was portrayed as mentally incompetent by Beatrice. And suddenly I was being treated like a helpless child in need of continual monitoring by the court and the attorneys. However, they had committed a crucial error. They had anticipated that Dr. Catherine Winters would never be involved in a judicial case, despite their meticulous planning and document fabrication. They reasoned that I would be too deeply upset to consider constructing a case and that patient confidentiality would keep her from disputing their fake medical documents. They were unaware that I had already contacted Dr. Winters. My initial reaction upon learning of Beatrix's plot and seeing those falsified psychiatric records was to get in touch with the one individual who was aware of my true mental health care. I had shown copies of the fake paperwork to Dr. Winters, who had been furious. In addition to being medically incorrect, they had falsified her signature on multiple important papers and used her practice's letterhead. Beatrice had done more than simply defraud me. She had committed a major crime by pretending to be a qualified medical expert. I felt a wave of calm confidence wash over me as I saw Beatrice and her attorney leave, talking about how they were going to approach the next hearing. Although they believed they had triumphed, the real conflict was only getting started. It seemed like the longest time in my life was the 2 weeks in between hearings. Beatrice quickly assumed control of Dad's assets, utilizing her temporary guardianship to prevent me from accessing anything, including the family house and bank accounts. While the estate was being worked up, she had even had the locks on her father's house changed, stating that it was for security. However, Dr. Catherine Winters and I had been working hard to create a strong case against Beatrix's dishonesty throughout those same 2 weeks. Dr. Winters had extracted all of my genuine medical documents and recorded all of the differences between Beatrix's fakes and the originals. Erroneously utilized medical terminology can be seen in the fake docs.as. We went over the facts in her office. Dr. Winters gave an explanation. Whoever came up with these obviously Googled mental health symptoms and plagiarized wording from the internet doesn't know how real medical professionals record patient care. She presented me with damning side-by-side comparisons. According to the falsified documents, I was prescribed drugs that weren't even utilized to treat the ailments they indicated. They included test findings from procedures that had never been done before and indicated symptoms that were contradictory to one another. More significantly, Dr. Winters added, they utilized the official letterhead from my practice and faked my signature. We'd spent hours reviewing every aspect of my actual treatment in preparation for the hearing. And this isn't simply fraud against you. It's impersonation of a medical expert, which has substantial criminal penalties. According to the actual documents, I had been receiving bereavement counseling to assist in dealing with Dad's loss, which was entirely appropriate and normal. The meetings had been about coping mechanisms and emotional support rather than mental health therapy. Additionally, Dr. Winters had prepared a thorough analysis of the creation of the forged documents, pointing out specific phrases that had been lifted from medical websites and demonstrating how Beatrice had used publicly accessible information about mental health conditions to create records that looked convincing but were medically nonsensical. As I investigated Beatrix's activities during Dad's last months, I called the hospital and found that she had been taking pictures of medical papers while visiting, saying she needed them for insurance. I had located a number of Dad's business associates, who confirmed that Beatrice had been asking unusual questions about the company's financial situation and future plans. And the nursing staff recalled her asking detailed questions about Dad's medications and treatments, which they had assumed was a normal family concern. She'd been gathering information for months, preparing for the moment when Dad passed away, and she could seize control of everything. The most disturbing discovery came when I reviewed Dad's final weeks in detail. Beatrice had been present during every conversation with doctors, lawyers, and financial advisors. As the date for the final hearing drew near, I was sure we had enough evidence to expose Beatrix's scheme because she had positioned herself as the responsible daughter handling all the practical arrangements, giving her access to all the information she'd needed to forge my medical records. She had put too much time and effort into this scam to give up easily, but I also knew she wouldn't go down without a fight. The night before the hearing, she called me with one last attempt at manipulation. "Lily, I've been thinking about everything that's happened. Perhaps we can come to an agreement." She made a generous-sounding but phony offer. "If you withdraw your objections to the guardianship, I promise to make sure you're well taken care of. You'll have everything you need, and I'll handle all the stressful financial decisions." In essence, she was offering to keep control of everything else and give me a portion of my own fortune. It was a compromise that was actually a trap. "No deal," I firmly informed her. "I'll see you tomorrow in court." I brought a bag full of evidence that would disprove Beatrix's meticulously crafted lies, together with Dr. Catherine Winters, to the courthouse on the morning of the final hearing. Knowing that we had the facts on our side and the medical knowledge to demonstrate every facet of her fraud made me feel both anxious and secure. Beatrice was already there with her attorney, greeting several court officials with a calm and understanding expression. Playing the part of the recalcitrant but responsible sister who only wished to protect her mentally ill sibling, she wore conservative dark clothing and applied little makeup. Her confident demeanor momentarily wavered upon seeing Dr. Winters, but she quickly regained her poise. The hearing began with Beatrix's attorney saying, "Your Honor, we are ready to provide more proof to back up our request for permanent guardianship. Since our last visit, Miss Lily Patterson's health has gotten much worse, and she has been acting more and more irrationally when discussing suspected conspiracies and document forgeries. By portraying my complaints as paranoid fantasies rather than real worries about fraud, he was attempting to proactively undermine any claims I could make regarding the falsified medical records. It was a smart move, but the evidence we were going to show would disprove it. He went on to say, Miss Patterson has been harassing medical professionals and making wild accusations about her sister's motives. This behavior demonstrates exactly why she needs supervised care and cannot be trusted to manage significant financial assets. My attorney rose to answer. Your Honor, we've brought in the defendant's real treating physician, Dr. Catherine Winters, who can testify to the real medical history in comparison to these falsified documents because we have strong evidence that the medical records in this case have been systematically falsified. Dr. Winters. You're Miss Patterson's treating psychiatrist. Yes, Your Honor. Miss Patterson has been my patient for grief counseling since her father's death, and she's been getting fully normal therapy to help her deal with her loss. The judge looked interested but doubtful. Beatrix's attorney immediately objected, saying, Your Honor, patient confidentiality prevents Dr. Winters from discussing specific medical details without proper authorization. Beatrix has never been diagnosed with any serious mental illness and has never displayed any of the symptoms described in those fabricated records. In a suave response, Dr. Winters produced a signed release form and said, I have written consent from Miss Patterson to discuss her medical history. More importantly, I have proof that someone has created false medical documents using my practice's letterhead and forged my signature. As Dr. Winters opened Beatrix's briefcase and started laying out the evidence, the color left her face. The side-by-side comparisons of authentic and falsified records revealed glaring discrepancies in medical terminology, impossibly strange combinations of symptoms, and prescriptions for drugs that didn't exist. Dr. Winters testified that these falsified documents include numerous medical errors that no qualified physician would make, treatment protocols that defy accepted psychiatric practice, and references to drugs and procedures that were never given to Miss Patterson. Beatrix's self-assured exterior began to crumble as the evidence grew, and she continued to whisper urgently to her lawyer, who was obviously aware that their case was falling apart spectacularly. While the forged documents that had appeared so convincing 2 weeks prior now appeared to be amateur attempts at medical fraud. Furthermore, Dr. Winters added, my signature has been falsified, and the official letterhead of my clinic has been utilized without permission. This constitutes impersonation of a medical professional, which is a serious criminal violation. As he went over the evidence, the judge's face became more severe. When Beatrice finally realized that her perfect plan was falling apart and that there was nothing she could do to stop it, the courtroom doors opened and her face turned completely white. What had begun as a family argument over inheritance had now become evidently a case of systematic fraud, perjury, and criminal impersonation. Your Honor, Dr. Winters declared, and I have more proof that shows these medical records were not only forged, but that Miss Beatrice Patterson systematically stole her sister's personal medical information to create these fabricated documents. Dr. Catherine Winters had arrived with a second briefcase, and Beatrix's self-assured smirk had completely disappeared. The judge was already looking at the new evidence with great interest. Despite Beatrix's lawyer's desperate attempts to object, Dr. Winters had brought computer forensics that demonstrated that someone had used stolen patient information to access medical databases, photo timestamps that demonstrated the creation date of the forgeries, and even hospital security footage that showed Beatrix taking pictures of private medical records. The person who created these forged records obviously researched psychiatric conditions online and then tried to create documents that looked authentic. But they made many mistakes that any trained medical professional would quickly spot. These forged records contain medical terminology that has been copied directly from online sources. Dr. Winters testified in a clear and professional voice. The phony records that had appeared so convincing were now exposed as amateur attempts at medical fraud, and she methodically dismantled every part of Beatrix's plan, pointing out impossible drug interactions, contradictory diagnoses, and treatment protocols that didn't exist in legitimate psychiatric practice. Miss Lily Patterson has been my patient for grief counseling following her father's death, she said. She has never had suicidal thoughts, been diagnosed with bipolar disease, or displayed any violent or erratic conduct, Dr. Winters added. The individual who falsified these records has defrauded Miss Patterson, the court, and my medical practice. As the truth was revealed, Beatrix sat motionless in her chair, watching months of meticulous preparation come to nothing. Her attorney appeared in disbelief, obviously recognizing that he had unwittingly assisted in providing the court with false evidence. As he took in the enormity of the deception, the judge's face was thunderous. Miss Beatrice Patterson, he stated sharply, you seem to have attempted to defraud your sister of her rightful inheritance by committing identity theft, document fraud, and perjury. The courtroom was rocked by the heartbreaking discovery that Beatrice had committed numerous felonies. As soon as the judge ordered court agents to take her into custody pending formal proceedings, her elaborate portrayal as the worried sister fell apart. Wait, please. When Beatrice understood that her independence was going to be taken away, she finally shattered her calm exterior and started crying. You're not understanding. All I wanted to do was preserve our father's legacy. Lily is not able to manage that level of responsibility. Her frantic objections, however, just made matters worse. Her previous testimony was now refuted by everything she said, demonstrating that she had been lying the entire time. After being completely duped by her false evidence, the judge was impatient with her justifications. Miss Patterson, said the judge sharply, you have attempted to steal your sister's inheritance through criminal deception, falsified professional documents, committed perjury under oath, and routinely misled this court with false medical evidence. Beatrice turned to me in a mix of anger and desperation as court officers came to arrest her. You've ruined everything, she screamed, dropping any semblance of sisterly concern. Dad always loved you more, and now you're going to destroy our entire family over money. These are serious felony charges that will result in substantial prison time. At last, her mask had fallen off entirely, exposing the resentful, avaricious person she had turned into. The judge turned to me and said, Miss Lily Patterson, I apologize that this court was initially deceived by fraudulent evidence. The concerned sister act was over, replaced by raw fury at being caught in her elaborate scheme. I watched as Beatrice was led away in handcuffs, her meticulous preparation and months of deceit finally coming back to haunt her. Your father's will shall be carried out as originally written, and you will receive your entire inheritance, as well as the right to sue your sister for civil damages for the financial and emotional harm caused by her criminal actions. When Dr. Winters' testimony revealed Beatrice's systematic deception, she was charged with perjury, document forgery, and attempted inheritance fraud, resulting in a 3-year prison sentence and significant financial penalties. I felt a complex mixture of satisfaction and sadness as justice was finally served, and the sister I'd once loved and trusted was now facing years in prison for her betrayal. In addition to being subject to ongoing civil lawsuits from both Dr. Winters' office and me, her image was irreparably damaged when the legal community discovered that she had committed perjury in court and falsified medical records, rendering her unfit for employment in roles requiring integrity or trust. When she was finally freed from prison, she was left socially and financially isolated because the expenses of her legal defense and the restitution payments mandated by the court outweighed any possible gain from the unsuccessful fraud plan. When they discovered she had attempted to take my fortune by making up claims of mental illness, her relationships with old friends and extended relatives were irreparably harmed. She struggled to restore any semblance of her previous life due to her criminal record. But I was able to use the wealth my father had left me to reconstruct my life and finally pursue the business degree I had put off while taking care of him throughout his illness. Beatrix's betrayal had been devastating, but seeing her face the full consequences of her criminal deception gave me a deep sense of justice and closure that allowed me to move forward with confidence and peace. Even though the experience taught me the importance of documenting everything and trusting professional expertise when facing those who would exploit family tragedy for personal gain.